ukactive figures state, Simon, that gym and leisure centre facilities in England have seen over 22 million visits since they reopened on June the 25th. In that time, 78 cases have emerged amongst customers. 78 cases amongst 22 million visits. And I'm quite sure that Hugh Edwards of ukactive, the chief executive, will say, well, why should gyms be subject to closure? And I'm going to ask you that very question, Hugh. Why should they? Hugh, good afternoon to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, Jim. How are you?
We're good, thank you very much, mate. That's the question, isn't it? You feel wrongly victimised here that gyms should not be subject to closure.
Yeah, 100%, Jim. Look, and we've been talking to the government this morning, and we've asked them to pause the process in Liverpool until there's been a proper consultation. We looked at the documentation that was released after the Prime Minister's statement yesterday, and we believe it has fundamental flaws. There isn't the evidence that you've just set out included in the reports that have been provided. And crucially, the government document says that any changes in around gyms and leisure centres would happen following consultation. And we've been speaking to the mayors of Liverpool, both Steve Rotherham and Joe Anderson. They said there's been no consultation. It's been a diktat. And also that they actually said they don't want the gyms and leisure centres to close. They've got overruled. So this is a mess. And we are asking the government to stop until we have proper conversation with the local leadership who knows best, and also the trade association, ukactive, and our key members.
What reaction did you get to that this morning, Hugh?
Conversations are ongoing, Jim, but we are very keen to make sure we get a pause. It might go up to the wire at midnight tonight, but we want to make sure we do and respect the best interest, because this will impact economically and also impact the health of the region. We have hundreds of members in Liverpool who will be faced with a real threat of closure, job losses, etc., and they are on the wire, especially those small independent gyms.
Yes, of course.
Absolutely. And then second, the health of the people of Liverpool will be damaged by this, because their physical and mental well-being will be impacted by the inability to use their facilities, in which they depend on hugely.
Did they not look at the stats before they made this decision, Hugh?
We can only hope that there was some decisions taking place, but the government reported last night in that documentation did not include the documents and the references to the statistics that you provided, and that's very frustrating. So we are seeking urgent clarity with the government right now, Jim, to make a pause, do the right thing, undertake a process with credibility. That's what people want. They want to understand that the decisions are being made with the right evidence, the right data, and with credibility, and with local involvement, and that's what we're asking them to do.
Sure, I've got to ask you, cases are rising all the time. Some of the figures are mind-boggling and very, very concerning. We know that. We see it all the time in every news bulletin. Can you assure us that gyms and leisure centres are acting in a very safe and mindful way to the absolute extreme?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Jim. And, we developed the guidance with the government, with SAGE, with Public Health England, with the Chief Medical Officer's team back in July, co-produced, setting the highest standards around ventilation, around sanitisation, social distancing, track and trace. And actually, one of the things you'll know when you go to the gym is that, the way you tap in and tap out, we've got the most up-to-date track and trace system within our sector. Hence, we've been able to work very closely with local authorities, environmental health officers. So the guidance has been at the highest standard, probably more than any other sector has had to face. And then secondly, our members have been incredibly diligent, and also customers, respecting the social distancing guidelines. And as you say, it's been reflected in the data. The prevalence of COVID within our sector has been very low, extremely low. And that's because of the diligence of both the customers, but also the workforce as well.
Sure. I mean, you don't go to a pub, Hugh, to improve your physical well-being, but you certainly do by going to a gym or a leisure centre. I mean, this is the thing.
But we know that there is a massive challenge around issues of obesity. The Prime Minister has talked about that very personally, but also crucially, mental health. We're going into another winter. It's going to get darker outside. People are probably going to be less exercising outside, and they want to use the facilities they depend on. They address issues of loneliness. They address issues of social isolation. These are community hubs within areas, and they will vastly improve the health and well-being of the nation. This is a sector that is a fundamental part of the fabric of local communities.
Yeah.
The evidence is there that we're safe. And the evidence is there that we're essential to supporting local needs as well.
I mean, Simon, Hugh is making complete sense to me here. What did you tell me earlier on? You've been locked in at home now for 10 days.
Oh, very much
Once
so.
you get out, you're off down to the gym.
Oh, very much so. Unlike you, Jim, I do know where gym exists. So I spend my time in gyms, and I have seen the anal retentiveness and the attention to detail that gyms are deploying, from quotas that are allowed in, very strict disciplined quotas in terms of understanding who's in the gym, how many people can be there, through to the methodologies being deployed to keep people separate, to keep environments sanitized, and to keep disciplines in there. And this makes no sense whatsoever. And I wanted to ask Hugh what he thinks is the driver behind it. I think it's attacking the young people of this country because they believe that ultimately by stopping them going into football stadiums and to pubs, they're the main makeup of a lot of these environments. That this is about changing people's behaviour and adapting them to the way that the government wants them to currently behave. But what do you think, Hugh, about the reasons why they're singling this out on you guys? Because I think it's completely and utterly unjustified.
It's a really interesting question, Simon. And I think, whilst there's obviously a prevalence of young people using the facilities, it is the youngest to the oldest in society. If you go back to July, we were the last sector to open, even though we were showing the guidance that had been presented. And we felt very frustrated at that because of the role we play. I think this is about having to try and make sure we have the strongest voice in the government, really championing the cause of physical activity right now. This is not a trade-off, Simon, between health and the economy. Gyms and leisure centres can support both. We are a sector which has been growing, going into COVID at 6% per year. We're driving economic activity.
Absolutely.
We're growing as a sector, and also we're improving the health of the nation at the same time. The government is faced with this dilemma of economy versus health. When it comes to our sector, there is no trade-off.
I just wonder, Hugh, to finish with, do you think they think it sets a precedent? In other words, if we keep gyms open, we've got to keep pubs open, we've got to keep restaurants open. We can't make one rule for one.
I'm worried about a sort of thinking around that, Jim, and I think you're looking at some of the things which are being seen as red lines, schools, universities, okay. You just can't close the sector just because you have to close something. It's got to be based on evidence, it's got to be based
Absolutely
on the data
right.
and consultation.
Well said.
Hugh Edwards, really enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Chief Executive of UK